Hello and welcome to FI Live, the live stream that the Food Institute puts out where we dig deep into important issues within the food and beverage industry. I am your host, Susan Choi, Digital Video Director of the Food Institute, and I'm so happy that you're here with me. This is an episode of FI Live we haven't had in a while. So we've been busy working on the FI Newscast, which you have recently debuted, which airs every Friday at noon on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Every Friday at noon Eastern time. That's when we release the FI Newscast, where we round up relevant news for that previous week in the food and beverage industry. Please check it out. Yes, thank you for joining us here at the Food Institute live stream. The Food Institute, your number one premier source of news for food and beverage industry goings on and happenings. We produce articles, we produce podcasts, we produce live shows like this, produce important webinars and podcasts. You can find it all at www.foodinstitute.com. You can go there to subscribe, to find out more information on how to become a member. Please check out that website. I also want to remind everyone that it really helps when you engage with us, when you subscribe, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel, when you engage with our content. That supports us even more. And we already appreciate your support and your views. So please don't forget to click on that subscribe button for the Food Institute. On YouTube, on Facebook, on those relevant social media channels that you frequent. I also want to remind everyone that this is a live stream. This is an interactive broadcast. So please feel free to chime in with questions and comments about today's show. And today's show is a good one. We are going to be examining the low and no alcohol beverage trend that has been coming up, that has been coming out in the beverage industry for the past few years. And it's made quite a big headway, both culturally and economically. We're going to cover all of that. And without further ado, I want to bring in my special guest. He is the CEO of the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, or otherwise known as ANBA. And he describes himself as a serial entrepreneur, a community builder, and a business coach. He's here today to share his expert insights on a fast-growing, multi-billion-dollar industry, the low and no alcohol trend. Please welcome Marcos Salazar. Marcos, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. I'm really excited to dive into this discussion and get questions from your audience. And yeah, like you said, this is just a really exciting and rapidly growing category. And there's a lot of opportunity for consumers as well as those in the industry to be able to really dive in.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, let's dive into it. First of all, please tell us, what is the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association?
Great. So the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, or you can also say ANBA, is the first association dedicated to adult non-alcoholic beverages. And we were, myself and our board, were really, really clear on what we mean by adult non-alcoholic beverages. There's the American Beverage Association that supports coffee, tea, sparkling water, etc. But we are very, very clear on beverages that are marketed towards adults of legal drinking age that are 0.5 ABV or below. So we actually don't represent low. It's specifically non-alcoholic beverages, 0.5 ABV and below. And really, the association emerged because, as you've seen, there's such amazing organic growth that's happened over the past 3, 4, 5 years. But there needed to be an organization that brought everybody together, both producers and industry, as well as consumers, to educate them and raise awareness about this growing category, but also just build resources and infrastructure. So these innovative entrepreneurs that are creating these amazing adult non-alcoholic beverage products have the resources and connections they need to grow their businesses.
That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. When you're up and coming in that CPG world, you need a lot of support, right? You need a lot of guidance from people who already know the business. And this is a new trend. And I want to get into the next question. Want to bring up some numbers here because to me, it's pretty astounding. The IWSR, they came out with a recent report saying that the growth has been just phenomenal. If you look at the numbers here, the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate, going up 7%, predicting 7% growth between 2022 and 2026 versus 5%, 2018 to 2022. And then in the 7%, 90% of that is expected to be spearheaded by the no alcohol subsector. And then when you go to the next stat, 2022, the low no alcohol industry surpassed $11 billion in market value, up from $8 billion. I mean, the numbers just say it all, don't they, Marcos? So would love to hear your thoughts as the head of ANBA. What is driving this phenomenon? You could correctly categorize it as.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is over the past couple of years, people have called this a trend, and it's not a trend. It's actually a shift in consumer behavior and what people are looking to when they're consuming beverages. And it's a confluence of a lot of different things. I mean, when you think about the healthy people wanting to be much healthier, and the mindfulness movement, and people being much more conscious about the food that they take in. The same thing is happening with the beverages as well. And think about the organic food movement. People are being much more intentional or conscious about what they're consuming. I think the second is that definitely with COVID, people are reevaluating their relationship with alcohol and really thinking about how it fits in their lives, and if they want to either moderate or drink less or just kind of give it up as a whole. But then you also have generational trends as well, where younger people, Gen Z and millennials, are drinking much, much less alcohol than previously. And then I think the other factor, which is I think the main driving factor, is that innovative entrepreneurs that are our members are creating some of the best tasting beverages in the world, period. Independent of whether they have alcohol or not alcohol in them. So I think what's happening is that there's so many more options at a much, much higher quality of product. So if you bring all of those forces together, and you're starting to see this being much more less of a trend and much more of a change in the food and beverage space.
Right. I mean, I remember reading in the report where I just showed the stats, the IWSR report. They did say that a main driving factor was definitely the increase, the diversity of products, the increase in quality, the increase in competition. Marcos, I want to ask, from where you are, is there a particular product that you see kind of standing out that may be driving this? Is it mocktails that's become more sought after? Is it no alcohol wine and beer? What are you seeing from where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's even kind of take a step back and think about what happened in the alcohol space, where you had a revolution in the craft beer space and then eventually the craft spirit space. But there was no real revolution within the non-alcoholic space in general, and specifically beer. So to your question, non-alcoholic beer has really, really been driving this category to a large extent. It's very accessible. People can purchase it in a lot of different places, as well as it's typically a little less expensive when it comes to purchasing, say, a 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer. So there has been that growth of non-alcoholic beer really driving it. But what you've seen over the past few years, and you've seen this in studies by Nielsen and IWSR, is that there's now, in the past couple of years, a greater percentage growth of non-alcoholic spirits and non-alcoholic wine. And that's really driven by the fact that there's much higher quality products and many, many more products in those categories that are available. So beer tends to be the driver, and it's one of the things that people kind of dip into the non-alcoholic beverage space. But you're starting to see spirits, wine, and then the ready-to-drink cocktails starting to grow much more, just because there are a lot more of those products that are entering the market.
And why was it, Marcos? I just want to it just occurred to me. I mean, but
Yeah.
why is it that it started with beer? Is it because it's just a product that it kind of just seems like a logical kind of entryway, like into into diving into the non-alcoholic space? Or did I think I read some reports where there were companies that had put out non-alcoholic beers in other countries like Europe, and that was seeing some success, and so they wanted to put it in the US market. I think that happened for Heineken, actually.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a number of kind of different forces that played into it. In European countries and other places around the world, non-alcoholic beverages are much more integrated into kind of society and consumer awareness, as well as establishments. I was in Barcelona um, last summer, and I was able to find a non-alcoholic beer in like 80% of every single bar and restaurant that I went. It was really pretty
Wow.
amazing. But when you end up coming into the US, we're not at that stage yet. Kind of think about 10, 15 years ago, if you were vegetarian or gluten free, there was really nothing on the menu, or someone could kind of make something for you in the back. And that's kind of what's happening in bars. I can kind of make a mocktail for you, or we have this like dusty old NA beer that's been there for a very, very long time. So that's much more established in other places around the world, and it's starting to come over here to the US, and then obviously growing very rapidly in the US. I think then the second thing is that there were a lot of entrepreneurs 2016, 17, and 18 that were brewers or kind of scratching their own itch, where they decided to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol or not drink. So they decided to create their own either breweries or non-alcoholic beers, and that's Athletic Brewing, that's Partake, that's Well-Being Brewing, and many others that started in 2016, 17, and then so those are the ones that were kind of the early pushers of the NA space in providing lots of different options for people. And then in 2018, 19, and 20, that's when you started to see a lot of the spirits and a lot of the NA wines starting to come into play, as well as the ready to drink cocktails.
Can I ask, within within ANBA, do you see more of a population of your members? Are they more owners of breweries? Are they more creators of mocktail product creators? What trends are you seeing in ANBA?
Yeah, and I think you point to something that was really interesting when we were trying to figure out what this association was going to be. So we don't just like you have the Brewers Association, you have wine associations, you have spirit associations. But since this was a new category, and in some instances, many brands were not just producing beer, but were producing wine and others in the same company, we decided to have an adult non-alcoholic beverage association that represents non-alcoholic beer, wine, spirits, and ready-to-drink cocktails. So we kind of have everybody under one umbrella, because we all had to come together to really promote, protect, and grow the overall category. So it is really, really diverse in terms of the different types of brands and the different categories. And there's kind of two elements to it. When I was recruiting our board, which is 11 board members, we needed to be clear that it represented all four categories at all different stages of the of businesses. So we have businesses that are in the early to mid stage, and then we have some that are a bit further along and that are representative of all the different categories. So we really thought that there was an opportunity to be able to connect everybody, especially those that were from different categories, because if someone ends up purchasing a non-alcoholic beer and they recognize there's something good, that could lead them to be able to purchase a spirit or a ready to drink cocktail, because either they like it or maybe someone in their family or they know someone who may end up wanting to purchase that, and vice versa. So it's a pretty diverse set of members that we have across all the different categories.
Oh, fascinating. All right. Well, we have a question we're going to bring up from our very own Brian Choi. He wants to know, can you share your perspectives on the market growth of wine versus beer? Is the beer category more conducive for growth versus wine? What are your thoughts, Marcos?
Yeah, Brian, and I think what I mentioned earlier is that beer tends to be the driver of the non-alcoholic beverage space right now in terms of purchasing, and then you also have a number of brands that are growing pretty rapidly. Specifically, you have Athletic Brewing that has received a large amount of funding. Keurig Dr Pepper just invested 50 million in them, and they're headed by Bill Schufelt, who's an amazing entrepreneur and has built a really amazing team. He's also our board chair. And with that investment, they've been able to really create awareness and drive the category and really get into establishments, whether it's restaurants, bars, and then really support other brands to be able to grow and integrate themselves into the space. So beer has been the driver. I think what you're seeing, what's interesting about the wine space, and this is the same thing that's happening in the spirit space, the quality of those products are getting higher and higher and higher. It was pretty well established, and there were brewing methods and some proprietary brewing methods that some of our members have of really creating amazing tasting non-alcoholic craft beer. And then now there's a lot of brands that are starting to then produce really high quality wine and spirits. So you're going to start seeing more and more growth in those particular categories. But again, beer tends to be a little bit of the main driver because they've been established. And they also have in some instances, an easier route to market than some of the other any wine, spirits, or ready to drink cocktails.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. Marcos, I want to ask you about age demographics. I mean, you did mention initially, one of the big reasons for the push with, the low, no alcohol lifestyle is the younger generations, the Gen Zs, the millennials, they're looking for, more, options when they go out to drink, or they want to have non-alcoholic options. Are they indeed the drivers for this? Or, is there something to be said for different generations, for older generations? I mean, for example, I feel like I've been seeing anecdotally, quite a few number of, older, older people, not elderly, older and elderly maybe, or like different generations that, older generations that have also expressed a desire to be healthier, or just, to go alcohol free, occasionally, or, maybe on a permanent basis. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I'll even kind of take a step back and establish something is that though, like you said, there's people that are reevaluating their relationship with alcohol, deciding to drink for whatever reason. But the main drivers of this category are those people that still drink but are looking to moderate. So about over 80%, and this is pretty consistent amongst a number of different stats, over 80% of people that do purchase non-alcoholic beverages that purchase non-alcoholic beverages still drink, but they're looking to not drink for a variety of different reasons, whether that is not wanting to drink during the week, wanting to moderate and switch out an alcoholic beverage and a non-alcoholic beverage when they're out, or for medical reasons, or they're training for a marathon. There's a wide variety of reasons that people are deciding. Now, across those demographics, what we're starting to see is that, yes, millennials and Gen Zs are drinking less alcohol, period. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is that then they're looking for still sophisticated, complex, delicious beverages to consume when they're out socializing or even when they're at home. But then the other side to your point is that there's older generations that are looking to moderate for whatever reason they're deciding to, but they have probably more cash to be able to spend on these non-alcoholic beverages. So you're also starting to see older people that are also purchasing them as well. I think the thing that's really interesting as we're getting into the stats is that I think there still needs to be more research on this. Like we partnered with Nielsen, we've IWSR, and we're also this year going to start doing our own internal research on consumers as well, because there needs to be some more teasing out and more data on this, especially when it comes to, like you said, generational elements to it, but also teasing out no and low and making clear that who are those people that are drinking specifically non-alcoholic beverages versus low alcoholic, because that can be confusing for consumers, as well as making sure that they're not including non-alcoholic beverages that are tea, water, coffee, that they're specifically adult non-alcoholic beverages. So I think there's been some really great statistics that are showing the rapid growth of the category. And over the next few years, you're going to start seeing even more and more detail into who these consumers are, why they're deciding to purchase these, in what occasions are they consuming these products, and why and when are they purchasing them for those particular occasions.
That's great. I mean, really sussing out, trying to really get at the meat specifically, really narrowing down, the accurate, like as accurate as possible, right? The statistics for your needs. I also like what you were saying about, it's really not about, it seems like you were basically saying it's hard to kind of pin down. There's no one reason why people want to, consume no alcohol, but that the trend that you're seeing of how they want to incorporate it. It's mostly, they still want to drink, but they want to moderate. They want to make non-alcohol. They want to have the freedom to make and the ability to make non-alcoholic choices, which reminds me of a similar trend that you see in the plant-based industry. kind of seeing from research that people don't, more or less, people don't want to cut out meat entirely, but they want to be flexitarian. Like that term has kind of become famous now. It's like having that option to go plant-based, like once, twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, but still having the ability to eat meat. I love the points that you were making up. I want to
Absolutely.
point
Let me
to.
kind of
Oh
say
yeah,
one thing
please go
about
ahead.
that. I
Yeah.
think you really saw that this past January. So dry January is obviously a big time for people to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol, decide not to go drink any alcohol for the month. But what was a really big shift this year is people not doing dry January, but damp January, meaning that it's not that they're cutting off fully, but they're wanting to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol, but still having that freedom if they decide to want to have an alcoholic drink, but going down the path of exploring what does this look like if I drink less, and what are the options that are available that I can substitute for an alcoholic beverages. And that's what really, we saw a lot of growth this year and a lot of feedback from our members, from consumers about going damp versus dry. And what's really great about that is that that actually allows, and it's kind of one of the fundamental things that all our brands and ANBA is really about, is really creating opportunities where people feel included in every social situation, in every social occasion. So as part of that damp dry January, or people wanting to explore whether it's being sober curious versus going directly sober, we want to create those opportunities where whatever your path is in terms of consuming non-alcoholic beverages, that everybody feels included and they feel like they can always have an option available to them to have a really great tasting beverage.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you for bringing up Damp January. I almost forgot about that. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that really illustrates very well what we're talking about. All right, I want to head to another question that we have from Paula Garcia. What role is technology playing in the development of no alcohol drinks?
Yeah, I think that's one of the other forces that's underpinning the proliferation of really great tasting non-alcoholic beverages now. And there's a couple things and let me know if I'm getting into the technology of making the drinks versus also technology in terms of marketing the drinks. But yeah, there's a lot more investment in now technology that's allowing for either the dealcoholization process of dealcoholizing any beer or wine, for example. And there's even third party companies, a company called 𝗏𝗡𝘂 that's one of our members, that's one of the leaders in dealcoholizing wine and beer, and a lot of our members use them to experiment and create products. And then there's those that are creating their own proprietary processes and methodologies in order to create their great tasting beverages. And it's a combination of the technology is developed, and then some of that technology that existed previously is then less expensive. So that's kind of the first thing. And then I think the other thing that's really interesting from a tech standpoint, and I'll kind of share this from a marketing tech standpoint, is that the unique thing about non-alcoholic beverages is that you can ship them versus an alcoholic beverages. So all of our members have e-commerce stores. So first and foremost, you can get products shipped to you. The second thing is that because you are able to you have a direct relationship with that consumer, you're then able to build community and really get to know your consumer, that allows you to be able to build brand loyalty and even create subscriptions on top of that. So there's been some really interesting kind of technology from like a marketing and business building standpoint, as well as technology from the production standpoint, that's really allowed for the rapid growth of these products in this category.
Yeah, some insightful things. Thank you, Marcos. Brian has another question for us. What's the general price differential on average between alcohol versus non-alcoholic beverages? How big of a role is inflation playing on consumption? That was my own question for you next.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that's really interesting about producing a non-alcoholic beverage is that it's actually more intensive and harder to produce a great tasting non-alcoholic beverage in many instances than an alcoholic beverage, because alcohol is a preservative, right? It's a killer of bacteria, and it's also a great vehicle for taste. So being able to mimic an alcoholic beverage as a non-alcoholic alternative, and be able to come up with a process to be able to do that is very, very challenging. So that's why you end up seeing the price points of non-alcoholic beverages at a similar price point, in some instances even higher than their alcoholic counterparts, because it takes much more time and energy and resources to do that. Alcohol is actually one of the cheaper ingredients of an alcoholic beverages because of the byproduct of the production process. So I think the challenge that people always have is equating alcohol volume to price, and there's not really that. It's a false association. So that's why you end up seeing some of the non-alcoholic beverages being at the price points that they are. And then in terms of inflation, it is having an impact across everything in general, but it hasn't necessarily slowed down the growth of from our members. I'm continually getting feedback from our members that they're still growing. It doesn't mean that they're not having any type of challenges in this economic environment, from supply chain issues um, to kind of like the increase in ingredients, to the increase in shipping materials. So that still is having an impact, but there still is enough of a demand that our members are able to compensate and still be growing as a result of, even though there's inflation.
Right, right. I also wanted to ask you about um, you had mentioned the need for more research, and you were saying one of the reasonings is really distinguishing, right? Like no alcohol versus low alcohol. And we have also seen a trend of companies, no alcohol. I mean, non-alcoholic beverage companies like Mountain Dew or
Mhm.
Monster Energy drink. They've just started to come out with low alcoholic counterparts. I mean, I think it's like 2% or 3%, sort of like hard sodas, they're calling it hard energy drinks. I mean, what are your thoughts on that category of companies? They're doing the opposite
Yeah.
of what, the companies that we've been talking about. I mean, what are your thoughts there? Like, is that going to become like a growing thing, within the market? What are you seeing?
Yeah, and we're starting to see this both in the US as well as in overseas in Europe, is that it tends to be very low, tends to be very confusing for the consumer. So is a low beer 3%, but then is a low wine 8%, but is a low tequila 20%, is a low Mountain Dew 2 or 5% or 1%. So it tends to be very confusing, and there isn't a specific standard, versus non-alcoholic is 0.5 ABV or below. There was a study that I think came out by the Brewers Association over the past kind of 3 or 4 months, or it might have been IWSR or something, where the low ABV beer is not seeing really any growth. And beer drinkers are either going low or much higher, like 8, 9, 10%. And there's been a real growth in those craft beer, like ABV amounts. And the low is actually decreasing. So it's interesting. I don't know if it's just simply a alcoholization and try to take advantage of a certain demographic that might want alcohol with Mountain Dew. But I don't see that particular kind of category continually growing because it's confusing for consumers. You've also seen, I'll kind of quickly say, there's been a couple startups. One was called, I think it's HAUS House. And they were kind of playing in the low alcohol kind of beverage. And I think they were like 18 to 20. And they just couldn't succeed just because it was confusing for consumers, or that was one of the factors. Because what does that look like? Why would I drink this versus something that, if it has higher alcohol, is it going to really make that much a difference from a taste standpoint? So I do think it's going to stay confusing for consumers.
Right, right. Bringing up a lot of things that even I actually didn't really think about. Yeah, when you really narrow down on the specifics, it can get a little confusing. But what I do want to ask you is, with all the stats that we're seeing, and the numbers just going up and up. I mean, what do you think, in your professional opinion, what is in store for the future for the no alcohol trend?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's interesting is, and I'll speak specifically to the US and Canada, is I think there's a huge opportunity, and we're starting to see more establishments, restaurants, and bars to start integrating non alcoholic beverages into their businesses. You're also starting to see hotel change and hospitality areas. So I think there's a huge amount of growth in a particular different sectors. One, kind of the health and wellness area, restaurants and bars. You have hospitality, but then you also have the event industry. So think about every single conference that should be thinking about have inclusivity and making sure that every single one of their attendees don't feel pressure to drink alcohol, or has a really great non-alcoholic beverage at every networking event that they have at the conference, versus being sidelined with soda or sugary drinks, or orange juice, or just like plain water. I mean, I'll give a personal example. I got married last September, and we had two bars, a full bar with alcohol and then a separate full bar with non-alcoholic beverages. And it had every type of non-alcoholic beverage that you could want. And it was an amazing experience for so many people that didn't want to drink for whatever reason, whether they just don't drink. We had a couple our friends who were pregnant and they were able to have champagne, wine, gin and tonics, non-alcoholic beer, and all kinds of different products, and they could feel as part of the festivities. So I think what you're going to start seeing is this continual growth, because we're just starting to see other businesses aside from retail that are going to start integrating these products into their businesses. The second is that you're going to start seeing in this year a lot more retail companies carrying non-alcoholic beverage sets. So CVS just recently came out with a non-alcoholic beverage set. You're starting to see more NA beverages in Target. Walmart is about to come out with a non-alcoholic beverage set, an adult non-alcoholic beverage set as well. So more and more retailers, especially when you have someone as big as Walmart, starting to change the whole entire market when they start carrying it in their stores, you're going to see more and more growth of the category.
Mentioning some really significant things there, especially I love that you brought up your wedding. I mean, thinking back to my wedding, I mean, the inclusion of a bar with the alcohol, I mean, that shoots up your costs like, astronomically. So I feel like special, like not just no alcohol, the culture, the ramifications financially from just like an individual perspective, but then you get into special events. Like I love that you brought that in there. I didn't even think about that. Like the financial like potential of that is huge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've talked with a lot of different types of events and forming a number of partnerships in a number of different levels, whether that's trade events, whether that is events that have attendees that produce some kind of content. And one of the things we want is that just as you have a refreshment bar with coffee and tea and water, you should also have some delicious non-alcoholic beverages there. So when you're walking around at, for example, South by Southwest, you should be able to be drinking an NA beer when you're walking, or a gin and tonic, or an 𝗂𝗶𝗴h or an 𝗂𝗏𝗡𝗄 spritz. That all is NA, and you feel good, about it. So that's one of the things where we're just at the beginning stages of that. Every wedding should have. When you're doing a champagne toast, there should be an opportunity to have both champagne that has alcohol and those that have non-alcohol, so everybody can participate in it. So we're at the beginning stages of that. And ANBA is, as an association, really driving awareness and education and really supporting and partnering with other associations on that. And then our members are doing that on an individual basis, day by day by day. And we're at that early stage where they're producing amazing products, but there's still a bit of an education element to the buyers that they're engaging with. And part of what we want to do with ANBA is going to take a little bit of that burden off their shoulders and really help in supporting and educating the industry, which that's exactly the reason why I'm here, which I appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely. Marcos Salazar, founder, CEO of the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, also known as ANBA. Marcos, thanks so much again for being here today. This was really educational, very informative.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And if anybody wants to follow up with me, they can always just go to the website. My email's there, or it's marcos@nabeverages.org. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Marcos. What's the website again?
nabeverages.org.
𝗟𝗏𝘃𝑏everages.org. Be sure to check that out, everyone. Thank you again, Marcos. This is great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that wraps up another great episode of FI Live. Thank you for joining us. I just want to mention some upcoming events that the Food Institute is hosting. On April 12th, we will have a webinar, the Food and Beverage Industry M&A, What to Expect in 2023. We're going to have some great thought leaders from BMO Capital Markets and the food partners to discuss current economic and capital markets issues impacting the M&A market across major food and beverage industry subsegments, and how both strategic and financial buyers are reacting to this dynamic environment as they assess growth opportunities both organically and acquisitively and platform investing. Hopefully I said that right. That's the first time I've seen that word. So you don't want to miss that. April 12th, go to www.foodinstitute.com for more information and to register. Also, don't forget, we have the FI Newscast airing every Friday at noon Eastern time. Don't want to miss this Friday's show, we're going to have a great guest for you, 𝗟𝗲𝘁 of Bloomberg. She's going to talk to us all about her insights in what's going on in the food and beverage industry. All right. Well, thanks again for joining. My name is Susan Choi. I've been your host. I hope you enjoyed this episode of FI Live. Keep watching. Keep checking us out at www.foodinstitute.com. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you frequent, whatever social media platforms you frequent. All right. Take care. Hope you guys have a great day.